What inspired me to run 100K on the occasion of International Women's Day? Welcome to Thank God It's a Story Saturday, a weekly video series where I share stories with you that you can use to make your messages stick. Today's story is about Kathrine Switzer, the first woman to run a marathon. It is from her book called Marathon Woman, which is her memoir. And because it's a story about running, I'm in my running avatar. Some of you actually know I love running. I'm just about to go for a run. Now, it all started in the year 1966, mid-December. It was cold, it was snowing. Kathrine had just finished running with her coach, Arnie Briggs, and they had had a heated argument. Otherwise, her coach, Arnie Briggs, was a really friendly guy, but that day they got into an argument. The backstory to the argument is this. 19-year-old Kathrine was a journalism student in New York, and where she lived or anywhere else she knew, there were no running groups for women. So she had joined the cross-country team for men, and Arnie was the coach for this team. Arnie had run 15 Boston marathons before, so any runners listening to me would know what a big deal that is. Now, what happened was that every time Arnie would cajole Kathrine into doing these hard training sessions, he would tell her stories about these Boston marathoners. And one day she said to him that I am so sick of listening to these stories. Can I just run the Boston Marathon? And he looked back at her and said, no dame ever ran a marathon. Women are not strong enough to run a marathon. And she disagreed. And he said to her, if there is a woman who runs the marathon, Kathrine, it is going to be you, but you are going to have to prove it to me during the training that you can do it. Training began. Kathrine very much proved it to Arnie that they can. They decided to register for the race, and they made sure they checked the rule book. There was nothing mentioned about the gender. Kathrine signed her initials as K.V. Switzer. Maybe that's why people didn't realize it's a female registration. They were ready. They were there. 19th of April, 1967, ready for the race. The race began, and there was this huge excitement in seeing a woman at the race. So men would turn around and say, hey, you're going to go the whole distance? Give me some tips. I'll give it to my wife. But that lasted only for the first 4 miles. Then a truck came that moved people aside, and behind the truck was this bus which had reporters, journalists, and photographers. The photographers were actually really excited to see a woman running a race, but on the bus was this guy who was wearing an overcoat and a felt hat, who looked at Kathrine, had said something which she couldn't quite hear, but didn't come across as something pleasant. Then within a few minutes, she heard these leather shoes on the floor, which is a very different sound to rubber running shoes. And this guy came and grabbed her glove and then just went right for her babe 261 that she was really proud of. He wanted to grab her, but she managed to escape. And whilst this hustle was going on, Kathrine's boyfriend, Big Tom, who was 236-pound ex-American footballer, was also running with her. He pushed Jock onto the floor, that guy who was trying to get the bib, and they continued to run. Now, Kathrine was really stressed after that. She told Arnie that, I don't know where you stand with this. I have clearly put you into a lot of trouble today, but I will finish this race today, even if I have to do it on my hands and knees. Because if I stop today, the thinking that women can't run marathon will be proved right, and I want to prove it wrong. Arnie said the first thing to do is to slow down the pace. Let's not worry about the distance. Let's just keep going. They kept going, and then the bus went ahead of them, on which was Jock Semple. The guy who was trying to get Kathrine's bib was actually the race manager, who said to her that you cannot run this race. Women don't run marathons. You're not allowed to run this race. He looked at her and said to her, you are in big trouble. They worried throughout the race. Kathrine said on top of that worry, later in the race came the pain, came the bruises, came the blisters, came the blood, but she was determined to get to the finishing line. And so she did. She saw that slope with the Prudential building and those big letters in front, finish. She finished that race that day and clearly changed the history for women in sports. Why am I telling you this story? I'm telling you this story is because this story has inspired me to stop listening stories about people only and actually move into action. So this International Women's Day, apart from doing the speeches that I do get very privileged to get invited to give, I am also running 100K in the month of March, and I will be supporting a charity in India called Jharkhand called Yuva. Yuva means youth. It's a charity that supports women by educating them and making them play sports and give them confidence through that. If you want to help me support this charity, the link is right below. And if you want to see my journey towards 100K, then you can also check it out on my Instagram. I will be regularly updating you here, but I'll show up on LinkedIn when I'm done with 100K. I also felt like I wanted to stop at stories. I wanted to move into the action mode. That's what I chose to challenge this International Women's Day. Happy International Women's Day. I'll see you next Saturday.